Okay. Well, hello to old friends and new. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to serve you in wrestling with this challenging project of a transition flexible framework. I'm very grateful to Anhai and to Monica, to Ruth, and to Arturo and Liza. All of you have helped in the creation of this thinking, this thought exercise. I confess when I first took the assignment, I had the impression that no one else wanted to do this. It had been hard to find someone crazy enough to try to figure out how to help all of us work together. So you'll see in this presentation and in the documents that there are lots of questions and lots of flexibility in the flexible framework. Today, I'd like to focus a bit on the key challenges, and also Liza encouraged me to talk a little bit about revenue model, because one of the things that Anhai and I discovered and Arturo in our interviews is that people need to have more regular funding in order to be able to devote the time to really advancing the training and making a much bigger impact with our common work. So I'll start just briefly saying who I am. I began doing transition training in 2008 with the first set of trainers in the United States. And I later became part of the international training team with Sophie Naresh and Nick Osborne, and did quite a few online transition courses. I then have worked more recently in Denmark for 4 years and helped EcoLeave create its first collaborative project, Communities in Transition. That was the result of my research and bringing people together around common objectives. My background is, I have a training. I was to be a college professor in geography and urban studies, but instead became involved in the peace movement in the United States, and then in the environmental and human rights movements, anti-apartheid, Central American human rights. And so I have a long background in political activism, worked in Washington, D.C. for years, and then for national and international groups, I helped Bill McKibben take 350.org international. And so I've done a variety of educational, leadership development, community organizing, political activism. I'm old. and I was so thrilled to find out about transition in 2008 and to become one of the trainers because of the potential that I think this movement has already demonstrated and could once again demonstrate in a much larger way. And I feel excited about the diversity of all of you as colleagues, and very excited and curious about how we might have some collective genius around creating a training that can be both global and create a kind of energy and revive the sense of power and optimism that transition brought to the world in 2005 and 6, and at the same time now in a way that Sophie Naresh always wished they could do but didn't have the capacity, that we can really diversify and regionalize, localize our trainings and make best use of all of our different skills. So like an ecosystem where different species, like a permaculture or an agroforestry project that we all love so much, how can we create an ecosystem of our collective talents and at the same time be offering a powerful and effective course or set of courses that can help people to advance the transition in their own communities much more rapidly, especially now that there are so many organizations that have picked up transition ideas, language, methods, and even closely imitated the transition movement. What is our niche in the global ecosystem of transitioning movements, governments, business, nonprofits, grassroots. What's our global niche as an organization? And then as trainers, how can we each be an ecosystem of mutual support and call on each other? And towards the end, we'll talk a bit about revenue models and maybe some steps forward in creating some kind of sustainable minimal level of funding that trainers could qualify to be a part of a global proposal, a global grant that could give us some consistency in funding so that we can provide some consistency in our global training and outreach. So now, Ruth, are you or Arturo, are you managing the chat? Because I will then count on you to interrupt me so that I can be looking at faces and trying to be as concise as possible. My understanding is I have about 15 minutes. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So, pardon?
Don't worry, Tina. Yeah, you have your time. Ruth is the person who is going to help us with the technical stuff. We have now a person, it's Roberto from Mexico. Roberto, ¿necesitas traducción al español para cambiarte a otro canal? Just go on, Tina. I will contact with Roberto, who maybe needs a translation.
Hola, hola a todos.
Okay.
Sí, pues sí, prefiero Arturo. Sí, es
Okay.
Hola, Roberto.
Hola, hola.
Well, so for Inter, we are going to speak with Ruth, and you told me how I can make the translation to Roberto, and you can go going on, Tina. I will help Roberto with the translation.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to jump into, I'm sorry, my mother is sick and I did not have a chance to figure out how to get the slides done and then pass them to my Spanish-speaking colleagues so that we could translate them. But we will be translating all of the documents. And one of the big conversations we've had is for us to be a global training team, we need to have much more emphasis on translation in the organization so that we can welcome people from many countries and have supported conversation. I'm going to share my screen now for PowerPoint. And it's a very simple, short presentation, just the beginning of sharing with you a document that I've been writing and Anhai has been engaging in critiquing and supporting it. So the idea of the flexible framework and the assignment we were given was to create a framework that has some coherence, some cohesion as a global movement, and at the same time is flexible. So how do we go about designing that? How do we make that work? Excuse me. So there were four key questions that seemed to come up. What purpose, values, principles, characteristics, and practices and agreements do we already have in place? So the first part of the flexible framework guide, this big document, which is a reference for you, an easy single place to go and get all of the information you need in order to be a part of the flexible framework training team, it's got links to all the decisions that have been made, all the agreements that Transition Network, the hubs, teams of people have already made so that you can easily reference them and use them to prepare for training. So part of the idea of a framework is that we all are coming out of some common values, common purpose, and some principles. And we can continue to have conversations about those values and principles. So for example, you know, emphasizing translation and emphasizing taking time to really hear different points of views and needs from people around the world. And then secondly, what shall our common global training goals, our common content, common modules or sessions, methods, tools, what shall we all do so that if someone goes to a training in Australia and then goes to a training in Brazil, they will recognize the foundation of our movement, the common characteristics, principles, the ingredients, etc. So how shall we provide some common material, and can we do it in a way that makes it easy? Should there be some exercises that take some of that content and make it more engaging and easier to translate? So for example, when I was working with an inner city community in Pittsburgh, a big, poor Black community, I took the principles and I turned it into an exercise, actually 2 exercises. And one of them was where they physically got up and stood in parts of the room and then spontaneously talked. So I didn't ask them to read a PowerPoint. I instead had them speak from their own experience, from, very much Pablo Freire type methodology of recognizing the wisdom in the room and drawing it out. And many of you I know have done similar kinds of things. Don Hall shared with me about skits and I found skits to be a very powerful way to bring in inequality issues and racism issues, and have seen some fantastic success with people who are otherwise considered the lowest in society, the least educated, and yet they came to life and found their power through the skits, through music, through that participatory interaction. So, are there sets of tools so that we as trainers can pick maybe the 1 or 2 or 3, the ones that really will work with the group, the audience we're working with in the training, instead of having just the PowerPoint. So I'm hoping that out of this initial framework discussion, it will inspire us to share our skills and tools around the common goals, the common content that we all have. The third question is, what shall we be sure to provide in every learning experience that we offer? And one thing that started emerging is that there are certain sentences, certain words that need to be translated well, certain concepts, certain pieces that we should be sure to include somewhere. So maybe what's flexible is where we include them, but the language and the concepts and, the experience, is something that's in common. It's just when and where and how we provide those specific words or experiences, like open space, or like, the elders, the ancestor, descendants conversation. So we allow flexibility in where it might go, or how long it might be. For example, I found that in many of my I've done over 70 trainings and in person, and I found that there were a lot of people that just did not want to go into the inner transition. They were extremely uncomfortable. And so I always believe we should push them, but I also didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable or make them feel that transition was a personal growth, cult, that they had to bear their feelings when they were not interested in that. And so how do you make it flexible for the people who love the inner transition as the most important part of transition versus the people who don't, we all have faced this problem. And so I changed the exercises just a little bit to make them, to actually give more time to inner, but to not rely on the spontaneous personal sharing as the first entry point, and that instead I would build up safety by having them connect with their local area group. I would do a big map in the very beginning and then have them cluster, and they would be with their cluster throughout the entire workshop. So that by the time we got to the inner, they'd already had quite a few conversations with these folks. They knew they lived near them or relatively near them, or had some other commonality, like they were all from big cities. So I would cluster people in various ways if I had people from many, many areas. And they could already begin to feel some comfort in sharing. So, that was a learning experience that I wanted to be sure they had a deeper inner experience, but I had to have some flexibility in the tools I would use. And then what content can we adapt to a local area? It's better if it's a local area, and to some extent to our own preferences. So for example, I do not feel as comfortable with, so I don't know permaculture. So I've been bringing permaculture people into my workshops for a long time to have them do a segment that's outside, no matter what the weather, unless it's a terrible snowstorm. And that way I made sure that the content was covered, even though my personal preference is to not try to pretend I know permaculture. So this is, I think, the area that we have the most difficult challenge is, how do we allow for our personal preferences without changing the training to be something else, where we are no longer a consistent group. I want to just stop there. Anybody have any, or should I just keep going, Arturo?
Just go on. I'm trying to solve a thing with the translation because there is one person who needs some help with the translation. But
I'm sorry.
Go on. No problem. Everything is all right.
So sorry. Okay, so should I keep going then? All right. So the central question then was, how can we benefit from the strength, inspiration, and power of being a part of a global movement, and also benefit from the local wisdom, creativity, the adaptation to local ecosystems and politics and cultures, and flexibility in our own styles as we offer the training and support. So the structure of the flexible framework is such that it starts, well, and I just want to mention these three questions that you'll find in the guide. We were asked to create the launch and the Thrive training, or any other trainings, but part of why you haven't received a lot is that we've been putting together this larger guide to the entire system with all the links to make it easy for new trainers to find and learn and understand the core concepts so that we can have greater consistency. And really, the three questions that emerge are, what would you need to agree to use a common curriculum framework? Because ultimately, we're depending upon each other to implement something in common in order to have a global movement. So what is it that you need in order to not just do what you're comfortable with? I had the experience in the United States where I had recruited a trainer who was outside of the movement, who had a lot of professional experience and skills. Well, when I did a training with this person, they just gave the content that they knew would be successful, that they had given many times before in other environments. And it was good content. It was fine. She was an excellent trainer, but it was not transition. it was social service. It was other things. So that's where we need to figure out what is it that we need, each of us, and to have a common framework. And then what flexibility is really important to you, just something that you don't want to give up, something that, and can we be bold and brave to share with each other. Arturo, I'm going to watch for your signal if you want me to stop, just put your hand up so that I can.
No problem.
Great.
Just go on.
Okay, thank you. And then thirdly, how shall we learn from each other so that we can evolve this training, so that we can truly understand, I'm sorry for the misspelling here, to truly understand and support life-changing experiences. So how can we learn from each other so that our understanding grows as a movement and we can offer these life-changing experiences for local communities? The transformative experiences. Okay, so this is sort of the structure of the framework and the guide. We start with the purposes and values of who we are, and then from that are some of the decisions that have already been made, but that we can review together: the trainer role, our role in the larger movement, and the functions that we play: outreach, communications, support, engagement of new people, new initiatives, and then the practices, what kinds of inner practices, communication practices, translation practices, all of the things that we need as an infrastructure. And then out of that, turning to the needs and hopes of the communities, the people we're serving, and the needs and hopes of all our colleagues in the transition movement, the hubs, the municipalities in transition, re-economy, all of the different inner heart circle. And then us as trainers, what are our needs and hopes? And then you in particular, so that we are starting with service to the communities and to the larger global movement and to each other, and then also caring for each of us, asking for what we need. Then the guide looks at the, sorry, I just lost my little place here. The training objectives. So we've got, these three major objectives of launching more initiatives and projects in communities, helping them thrive and grow and advance, re-economy with municipalities, HART, conflict resolution, etc. So that together we can reduce the harm that we're causing to the planet and act very quickly. As many of you know, we are essentially out of time. We need a miracle now, and it's absolutely dire. So how do we both bring positive hope and bring the absolute urgency? And I think we've got a lot to learn from each other, some skills and tools that can help us. And then the last bit of the flexible framework is, looking at our tools, beginning to think about programs. I'm excited about this conversation series as a place that Arturo is creating for us with Anhai and Ruth to have a discussion about what programs we could develop together so that we can raise money. One of my hats is fundraiser. Nicola, Hillary, and I did a fundraising course for re-economy about 5 years ago that was very popular. I think there's a lot that we could do. There are a lot of US and there's some European foundations that are very interested in funding global efforts. So if we can create a program or programs and develop a set of tools that we can be a special niche in this global movement, perhaps we can provide some programs that will raise money, and at the same time, I was thinking of it as a tree of options, that with the transition network as our administrative trunk and our groundedness, and then the hubs, like our, the stem of our tree, like the strengths, if we could build that out into regional teams and also have these options for, as Don calls it, a series of workshops or a set of workshops that we can market and take people through, we will be able to market ourselves and to raise funds. So in advancing our offerings, there's several ideas here. Coordinate with transition colleagues to offer a tree of options, develop the regional teams, collaboration funding, identify key audiences and our niche in the global transitional movement, and some of the specific ideas that have already emerged. Develop a recommended set of courses, perhaps develop a leadership, a facilitator track, perhaps develop a consultancy to take the municipalities' work to those who can pay for it and badly need outreach. One of the big challenges for all the municipalities that are trying to implement the transition idea is getting citizens engaged, and that's what we specialize in. So perhaps we have some potential to create a consultancy, regional or global or both. And perhaps we need to focus on the very local scale, like transition streets and all the projects that engage more people. So then finally, Liza asked me to just, I mentioned my thoughts about a revenue model, and she asked me to just mention it here. I think this is an area for conversation. Perhaps we could start with some skill shares to develop our niche, and then move to developing a strategy and programs that we can sell in proposals. And perhaps at the same time that we look for funding from governments and foundations, et cetera, we could also develop our business side, our consultancy for nonprofits, for local governments, et cetera, or to build regional or local collaborations. And then in the process to continually ask ourselves, how shall we, who is our audience? Who are the primary people who can be movers that we can bring into the transition movement? Or who are our different audiences? And what kind of visibility do we need to create on? And I know Transition Network has a lot of, and other of our partners have been working a lot on that. And Transition Together in the UK has devoted almost the whole staff person just to the publicity side of this. Okay, so our next steps, we've got the launch training draft that you received in mid-August. The Thrive will be coming by the end of this month. The guide will be coming very shortly. It's a document that will need to continuously be updated and fixed, but you'll at least have that framework and what we've got so far. Sophie Banks has a very small grant, like a day and a half of work to advance some inner transition or to give us a workshop. So that's a flexible resource for all of us to decide whether we want her to update the inner transition segments, and or would we like a presentation from her. She's doing some wonderful current work. Nick Osborne is also doing some fantastic work. He doesn't have funding from Transition Network at this time, but he can be available for some, we can participate in his courses on our own. And then I just want to say thank you from Anhai and I for all of your openness and interest. And we look forward to more of your comments, and we'll be sharing the results of our research that Arturo has helped us with. Okay. Oops.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you for your presentation. And I really want to say that we are doing the Spanish critique, and I have already sent it to our colleagues from Latin America and Spanish speakers. We haven't received a lot of that, so it's a reminder for the people who are here, like Roberto, Beatriz, and Claudia, with a little bit of Spanish, to give us feedback to this Spanish critique. And that's part of what we are trying to do also with the translations. And Arturo?
Sorry, I'm going to translate quickly to Roberto. As I say, we have a problem with the translation. I'm writing. Roberto, ¿me estás escuchando? Te voy a hacer una traducción de lo que dice Anaí. En este momento está diciendo que ya se enviaron para que la gente hispanohablante pudiera hacer la crítica, pero todavía no hemos recibido lamentablemente muchos comentarios al respecto. Pero bueno, ahí estamos en ello. Dime si me estás entendiendo, and you can continue, Anaí, you can speak slowly. I made the translation very quickly to Roberto. Go on.
Gracias.
So you can continue, Anaí. I will make the translation.
I'm having a little bit trouble with my internet. I was talking, but I thought you weren't hearing me. So, well, this is the presentation for our first conversation for flexible framework, but why we are here. This is part of our another step we are doing with trainings, that is to make this community of practice. And I know we have been there in a community of practice. We have trying, and we have been in another communities because we are all facilitators. And we really want to know how we can do this together, and how can we experiment, how can we make like a laboratory for not just flexible framework with all the trainings, also where with all the tools we have, the ones that Tina was saying, no? These things about all the skills we have, not just for transition, but we develop them to take it to the trainings. And also with the conversations we have in with the interviews, we see a lot of things that are coming on online trainings. Because of COVID and the pandemic, we have new tools that are coming to the online trainers. And I also have a conversation with Claudia that was about young people, the need to develop these trainings for young people also. We are going to share also these briefly all the ideas of these interviews that are very interesting. And what we like to do is to with this first conversation to do this kind of things, and also to use, and I want to remember that we have a very nice platform that is Home Hub, and it will be nice that we have this conversation on Home Hub. I don't know if you have something else to add before we go to the Miro board, Ruth or Arturo?
And just you speak a lot. I have to make a translation to Roberto very, very quickly. Roberto, atención, escúchame. Estamos hablando de que esta es una primera conversación de otras que va a haber. No solo se refiere a este marco flexible, sino que también se van a convertir otro tipo de herramientas y habilidades. Ha habido habilidades y herramientas nuevas que han salido. Anaí ha tenido varias conversaciones, entrevistas, también yo, y ahí, bueno, se han visto muchos tipos de trabajo, y bueno, esta es la primera conversación que queremos hacer de otras muchas. Y bueno, ahí tienes la plataforma de HandUp, que está maravillosa, Y bueno, ahora vamos a continuar pasando a un mirror donde vamos a escribir. Bueno, espero que te hayas enterado bien y le paso a Anaí. Dale, Anaí, yo voy a hacer todo lo posible para que esto
Okay.
funcione.
I have a doubt. Are we going to, Arturo, technical? We were planning to make some breakout rooms before we go to the mirror board. This idea of the mirror board is one of the, some of you are know this tool, but what we like is to explore more tools. If you have another one, if you, for now we were working in this, but the idea of community practice is to share also these tools. And I made this one for these conversations, but feel free as a community of practice to develop something else in this board or to propose something in this board because it's part of what we like to have with you. And before that, I have this doubt because we're planning to make so breakout rooms, Arturo.
Well, I think in our planning, we have to make, we think to make a little pause of a few minutes so that people can go to take a coffee or to relax. In the time, I will speak with Roberto a little bit more. So I think if all of you is okay for you before going to the mirror, we can make a little 5-minute pause, just 5 minutes, and then we will return to go to the mirror and work together in different groups. Entonces, Roberto, vamos a hacer una pausa pequeñita de 5 minutos y después vamos a volver y nos vamos a meter en grupos. Intentaremos que hagamos grupos en español para estar hablando contigo, de repente con Beatriz y Anay. Well, you think it's okay to make this little pause and then we return and go to the breakout rooms?
5 minutes?
Yes. We have a wonderful DJ. Now, Ruth, it's your turn. Put some music. Go on. Roberto, enciende tu micrófono si quieres, si me estás escuchando.
We are all back. Sí, ¿verdad? Sí.
Yes.
Just when we were starting to make more conversation, we came back. It was, I think it was a few times, but this is also the idea, to start the conversation and then to realize that we are planning the other conversations based in what we need to talk about together, no? And how was with the mirror board? It was complicated or something, because I was doing the notes in some sticky notes, and I will appreciate a lot to have a feedback for that. And as I told you, you're now part of the mirror board and you can make some suggestions, because this is our first board together for this conversation. So let me know if you need something with that, and I will appreciate a lot this feedback. Arturo, do you want to continue?
Yes, I'm going to translate very quickly. Entonces, Roberto está preguntando un poco cómo fue el tema con el mirror, si había alguna pregunta. Entonces, se va a abrir como una conversación sobre ese tema, sobre las notas en el Miro. Okay? You can continue, and I already translated.
Yes, pues this is the idea is right now to have, is there something coming for some of the groups? Do you want to talk, one of you, about what you were talking about? And it's important to you to tell to all the group? Someone would like to share with us?
Ahora vamos a abrir una conversación para preguntas y temas. You are mute, and we cannot hear you. Okay, so now the idea is to share some opinion about this breakout room. If you have any comment, or also about what Tina told us. So we still have like 12 minutes, and we can just have an open conversation between all of us about this Miro and about what Tina already said. So it's open for you. You can open your microphone. Yes, go. Don, you can open your microphone.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about a little bit in our group was just the kind of lack of flexibility in the past, or a perceived lack of flexibility, and being, happy that this is happening right now, that we're discussing a more flexible approach. And I think, the devil or the divinity will be in the details of how this is actually worked out. What is the balance between how much is consistent and required, and how much do we allow for individual creativity and innovation and adaptation to place and culture. And I was saying, I would err on the side of being a little bit more flexible. So yeah, I'll just throw that out there.
Bueno, Roberto, entonces él está feliz un poco de que se ha creado este Flexible Framework, y bueno, vamos a ver hasta qué punto es flexible. Más o menos eso venía hablando en muy resumido. ¿Okay? Go on, Anai, but we cannot hear you, Anai. No. So I don't know if Tina, you have something to add, or anyone in the room. Just go on, Tina. But you are mute.
My apologies. So we've been working on this big document, the reference, the central place where you could find all the historic decisions that have been made by teams and volunteers and transition initiators by our movement. And so I see those past decisions as a request to all of us as trainers to represent the collective body. And I so agree with Dawn that if we have some continuity, some core global concepts, content, and then we have some different tools on how to provide it. So you saw the launch design we did, and you'll see it was very similar to what had been done before. And that we really have been struggling because we don't, Anahai and I did not want to make decisions for the entire movement. We've thought maybe instead the conversations and the skill sharing, instead of arguing about things, we can share what has worked, and out of our common past agreements and what has actually worked, and what is, you know, a niche that we can create for the transition movement. And so it's not quite ready. We were going to send it out after we had it reviewed and translated into Spanish. So why don't you hold off on comments just a little bit more until we get, you know, we'll send you the word in a day or two, but we just want to just give it one last, there's a couple, so we did a bunch of interviews and we don't have all the interviews added in the report yet. And we don't want people to go through and read it missing a bunch of key insights and information. But feel free to go ahead and start browsing. And yeah, if you want to start making some comments, it's just, there might be some things deleted that we're still trying to condense it as well. I should say I'm trying to condense myself. So, but yeah, it's a work in progress. So.
Okay, thank you, Tina. I'm going to translate very quickly to Roberto. En el link que ha compartido Tina está el documento que se está elaborando de este Flexible Framework. Yo no sé si ese es en inglés, pero también hay uno en español. Y la idea es que, claro, esto lo está haciendo Tina y Ana y yo estoy colaborando, pero la idea es que toda la gente pueda contribuir haciendo comentarios en este documento, porque realmente nosotros también simplemente estamos ofreciendo un marco general, pero la idea es que sea un marco que se haga entre todos.
And maybe what I should just say, since people are going to look at the document, maybe if you want to go where you see my cursor, it's part, I don't know if everyone can go there. So I will say everything that you could be looking at. But if you go to where my cursor is, it's on part 6, which it says framework. So the first 5 sections are all about agreements and learnings and insights from the past. And then starting with section 6, framework, we talk about 3 types of content: global and core content, the essential content, the ideas, the tools, the experiences, the words and concepts, the inner, the ethos. What are the essential ingredients, characteristics, principles, values that are fundamental? And that the 8 principles, I found that those can be a skeleton along with all these other pieces for helping to determine what is transition and what isn't. So we can have some more conversations about that. The second, where my cursor is, the local flexible content, with the emphasis on local, that when we aren't sure, instead of just talking, you know, we're all experienced. We all could provide lots of different kinds of workshops and training. We all could get up and speak in front of a group. So that's not a problem with coming up with our own content. But in service to the local community. What, the flexibility should first be what serves the local community, and then what fits the, my personality, so that it's in service to the larger movement, and then secondly to the local community and the people who are there. I have changed trainings based on the first go round of people saying why they came. I always start with why they came, and I will hear things, conflict, problems with an organization that is doing transition activities, but they are privatizing transition for their own organizational identity and fundraising, or a government that is not responding or is even opposing reducing energy use, etc. So those kinds of, if we broaden our tools, then we can come up with many creative ways to respond to the needs that are expressed by the people in each local context. And then third, what are some of the best practices? What are some suggestions? And that's where I think together we could immediately start sharing all kinds of things we've done, just very wide open. And that can help be like a resource place, a big open space room where we might influence each other, and we might say, let's change to do this. So for example, in the UK, they're now offering community organizing. Now, I come from a community organizing background, that is language in the US and now in the UK that refers to political organizing. So I have used community organizing in my transition. I mean, I view transition as community organizing, but I stay true to the content. The way that I present it is more organized to get results by the end of the training. I'm not just doing education. I'm taking people through, I'm using all the transition pieces, but by the end, they're more organized as a community without having changed the content. However, I think what they're offering now is more classic political skills training. And so I think that would be a place, that could go in the suggested content best practices where they feel very strongly, but it's relatively new for transition. Transition has not been a political movement. And so how do we respond to the urgency of this time and yet also, stay true? So I'm proposing that we put all those good ideas into the suggested content basket where we can have discussions. And then you see I lay out some of the rationale and some of the different partners going through these three sections, and talk a little bit about what are some of the limits to flexibility. And so you've heard me talk about these in this webinar, and also the emphasis on relationships, that we're not just coming in to be a performer giving our show, that we are actually about serving that local community with a whole set of tools in our toolkit. And so together internationally, we can share those tools and help all of us find, as Don was saying, the balance where we're doing essentially both. We're being flexible, but we're delivering core content and help.
Sorry,
also,
Tina?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just one moment. Well, now the conversation is starting to be very interesting. But we have we almost finished. We are already finished with the 1 hour and a half. I'm very sorry to stop you, Tina, because I think that now is the moment where we can start to have a really nice conversation, but we have to close. So I will like to invite everybody. You want to say something quickly, Don? No? Okay. So I will like to invite you to just say, just in a word or in a sentence, to say goodbye to everyone. For us, it was a pleasure to have this time with you. And we will invite you in 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks, we will have another conversation. The next one, always at the same time, the same day. The next one is going to be with Juan del Rio from Spain. And it's about how create and maintain a community of practice. So all of you are very welcome. We can continue the conversation in the Hub. We have the chat. We have all the information that we can share. So it was really a pleasure to have all of us with you today. I hope you enjoy. We try to do our best. Roberto, no te puedo hacer la traducción. Esto va muy rápido. So we will finish for a sentence with everyone. Thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. My word is inspired.
It feels like just the beginning.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you very much.
Merci.
It's great to see other trainers for the movement.
Bueno, entonces nos vemos en la próxima. We'll see in the next one. So have a nice day. We hope to see you soon again. It was a pleasure.
See you next time.